Jake's boots crunched against the dry, cracked earth as he carefully made his way through the dense alien jungle. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the strange plants that seemed to grow in every direction. He could hear the calls of unknown creatures echoing through the trees, their voices a strange melody to his ears. He had seen many things in his time on this planet, but today, something felt different. The air was thicker, heavier, almost as if it were warning him of something. He adjusted the strap of his rifle on his back and glanced over his shoulder. His team was supposed to be nearby, but the dense foliage made it hard to keep track of anyone. They had been sent to explore the deeper parts of the planet, cataloging new species and resources. But the further they went into the jungle, the stranger things had become. It wasn't long before they lost contact, and Jake found himself on his own. As he moved forward, the sound of something large rustling nearby caught his attention. Jake froze, his heart rate quickening. He wasn't sure what it was. Something big, maybe a predator, or perhaps a native creature that lived deep in these woods. Slowly, he crept forward, careful not to make any noise that might give him away. Then, just ahead, he saw it. A web. Not the kind you would find on Earth, but something far larger, more unnatural. The webbing stretched across the trees like a thick, shimmering curtain, glistening in the fading light. It was too big, too complex to be made by any creature he knew. His curiosity got the better of him, and he stepped closer, his eyes scanning the webs for any sign of movement. At first, he didn't see anything. But then, his eyes landed on a figure caught in the webs. His breath caught in his throat. It was a girl, but not like any girl Jake had ever seen. Her skin was pale, almost silver, and her hair shimmered like strands of black silk. She was curled up in the webbing, her body wrapped tightly in the sticky threads. Her eyes, glowing faintly, were wide with fear, and she struggled weakly against. Her bindings, the sight of her helpless and trapped, struck Jake deeply. He instinctively reached for his knife, but then he stopped. Something about the girl felt ... different. He had no idea what kind of creature she was. But there was something almost otherworldly about her. A chill ran down his spine as he considered the possibility that she wasn't human. Maybe she was. A native of this planet, or perhaps something even stranger, like the werewolves of old Earth legends. But Jake couldn't leave her there. No matter what she was, she needed help. He stepped forward, careful not to disturb the webs more than he had to. "Hey, are you all right?" he called softly. The girl's head snapped up, and for a moment their eyes locked. Her expression was a mix of fear and confusion, but also a glimmer of hope. She tried to speak, but her voice was weak, barely more than a whisper. "Help, please, ... She gasped, her voice trembling with desperation. Jake's heart raced. He could see the fear in her eyes, and it only made him more determined to help her. But how? He had no idea how to untangle her from those massive webs. The silk was so thick, so strong, it seemed like nothing could break it. As he got closer, the girl's body began to tremble. She started to shift, her hands clawing at the webs in a frantic attempt to free herself. Jake froze, watching in confusion. As her features seemed to warp, her muscles bulging under the tight strands of webbing. Her eyes glowed brighter, and her sharp teeth showed in a snarl. "Oh no," Jake muttered under his breath, taking a step back. Wasn't sure what was happening, but it wasn't normal. He could hear her breathing heavily now, as if something inside her was changing. The girl let out a low growl, her body convulsing as her transformation seemed to be taking hold. Jake instinctively reached for his weapon. But before he could even draw it, the girl's body suddenly went still. The growl died in her throat, and her eyes faded back to their soft glow. She was no longer struggling, but Jake knew she was still dangerous. He didn't know what kind of creature she was, but it was clear that she was more than human. The girl managed to speak again, though her voice was strained. "You can't let them catch me. I'll kill me." Jake's confusion deepened. "Who will kill you?" Her eyes flickered with fear as she glanced over her shoulder, as if she were waiting for something to appear. In a rush of sudden clarity, Jake understood. The girl was in danger, and whoever or whatever had placed her in this webbing was coming for her. Without thinking, Jake rushed forward. The situation was dangerous, but leaving her behind was even more so. He had to do something. He pulled his knife free from its sheath, and with quick, sharp movements, began cutting through the thick strands of silk that held her. It wasn't easy. The webbing was tough, like steel, and his knife barely made a dent in it. But he didn't give up. The girl, still weak, let out a pained gasp as he worked to free her. Her skin was cold to the touch, but beneath the fear and exhaustion, Jake could feel the strength in her. She wasn't just any creature. She was something more. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last of the webbing snapped free. Jake pulled her away from the webbing, catching her in his arms just as she collapsed, exhausted. Her eyes fluttered as she looked up at him, her breathing shallow. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jake's heart raced as he held her. "You're safe now." But deep inside, he couldn't shake the feeling that the real danger was just beginning. Jake lowered the girl to the ground, his arms shaking slightly as he gently placed her on the soft moss. Her breathing was shallow, and her body was trembling with exhaustion. For a moment, he just watched her, unsure of what to do next. The jungle around them seemed quieter now, the strange sounds of the forest replaced by the rhythmic pulse of her labored breaths. "Are you okay?" Jake asked, his voice softer now, his worry deepening as he knelt beside her. The girl's glowing eyes flickered open, and she looked up at him with an intensity that made his heart skip a beat. Despite the fear and confusion in her gaze, there was something almost ancient about her, something that made Jake think she had seen things far beyond the reaches of human experience. She swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. I'm not sure what's happening to me." Jake frowned. Her words were barely coherent, and her body seemed to shift involuntarily, as though it couldn't decide if it was human or something else. Her form was changing again, her muscles bulging as her fingers morphed into claws, and her teeth seemed sharper than before. Jake instinctively stepped back, his hand reaching for his weapon. But the girl's eyes locked with his, and he saw the fear in them. This wasn't her fault. He could tell that much. The transformation, whatever it was beyond her control. The girl wasn't trying to hurt him. She was just struggling. "Tom." "Down," Jake said gently, trying to reassure her. "I'm not going to hurt you." The girl blinked, her eyes slowly returning to their softer, more human-like appearance. She took a deep breath and steadied herself, her body shaking less now, but still not fully in control. I didn't ask for this," she whispered, her voice filled with a mix of pain and frustration. "I didn't want to be this way. It's a curse." Jake watched her carefully, unsure of how to respond. He had seen many strange things in his time as a soldier, but nothing like this. He had never encountered a creature that could shift like this, transforming from a girl into something more. But in her eyes, he saw the truth of her words. This wasn't something she had chosen, but something forced upon her. She was a victim, not a monster. "What are you?" Jake asked, his voice steady, despite the swirling confusion in his mind. The girl hesitated for a moment, and Jake could see that she was struggling to answer, as though the question itself was a painful one. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath before she spoke again, her voice trembling. I'm a werewolf," she said, her words heavy with sorrow. "I was born this way, but it's not just a curse, my people. We are different. We are part of an ancient race that can shift between human and wolf forms. But I'm not like the others. I'm an outcast. Mistake." Jake stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. Werewolves. He had heard stories, but he never thought they were true. The girl's words seemed almost unreal, but the evidence was right in front of him. He had seen her shift. Her transformation was undeniable. "I was captured," she continued, her voice now low and full of bitterness. "I was part of an experiment. They wanted to harness our powers, to use us as weapons. But I escaped. I ran, and now I'm hunted." Jake's heart went out to her. It was clear that she had been through more than anyone should have to endure. And now, even after escaping her captors, she was still trapped. Trapped in a body she couldn't control, and hunted by the very creatures who had done this to her. "Who are they?" Jake asked softly. "Who's after you?" Her eyes darted around nervously, as though the answer alone might bring danger upon them. "They're the ones who created the spiders, the ones who control this jungle. They've been hunting me. For days, I didn't expect to find a human here." Jake's mind raced. The spiders, the giant webs that had ensnared her. It all made sense now. They weren't just random creatures of the jungle, they were part of something larger, something far more dangerous. "We have to move," Jake said, his voice firm. "We can't stay here. We're not safe." The girl nodded weakly, struggling to sit up. I can walk." Jake helped her to her feet, though she wobbled slightly, still unsteady. She was much stronger than she looked, but the strain of her transformation had taken a toll on her. As she took a few slow steps, her claws retracted, and her skin seemed to regain its usual softness, though her eyes still glowed faintly. They both turned and began moving through the jungle, Jake keeping an eye on their surroundings. The dense foliage made it hard to see far ahead, but Jake's instincts told him they were being watched. He could feel the presence of something lurking just beyond the trees. "What's your name?" Jake asked as they walked, trying to break the silence. The girl looked at him, her expression hesitant. "Lyra," she replied quietly. "Lyra, of the Silver Moon Clan?" Jake nodded. The name sounded familiar in a strange way, but he couldn't place it. He didn't have time to dwell on it now. They had to keep moving. Lyra paused, looking around. Cautiously, "They'll be coming for me soon. They won't stop until they have me back." Jake turned to her, his jaw clenched. "We won't let that happen." Lyra gave him a small, thankful smile, but there was still fear in her eyes. "Don't know if I'm strong enough to fight them. The transformation takes everything out of me. I'm afraid of what I might become." Jake placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll figure it out together." They continued through the dense jungle, the tension thick between them. Every rustle in the bushes, every flicker of movement in the shadows made Jake's heart race. He had no idea what they were up against, but he knew one thing: he couldn't let anything happen to Lyra. She had already been through too much, and he would make sure that she didn't have to face it alone. The thick alien jungle stretched endlessly before them, the tangled undergrowth almost feeling like it was alive. Jake kept his eyes sharp, scanning the trees and the shadows for any sign of movement. They had been walking for what felt like hours, and Lyra was slowing down, her exhaustion beginning to show. The strain from her transformation was taking a toll. Jake could see the occasional tremble run through her limbs. He stayed close to her, ready to support her if she stumbled. Again, her strength was impressive, but there was no denying that she was still struggling. The jungle around them felt like it was closing in, as if the trees themselves were watching them, waiting for the right moment to strike. Lyra, on the other hand, remained alert, her glowing eyes flicking from side to side as they moved. Her heightened senses, a result of her werewolf nature, allowed her to detect threats before Jake could. She was still on edge, but there was a quiet resolve in her expression. She was fighting back, determined not to let her past define her. "Are you sure you're okay?" Jake asked, his voice filled with concern as they moved forward. Lyra nodded slowly. "I'll be fine. Just tired and worried. They'll be coming for me soon. I can feel them." Jake understood. It wasn't just the spiders that they had to worry about. The creatures that had created the webs, the ones who had captured her in the first place, were still out there, hunting her. And now they were hunting them both. They had to keep moving, but the dense jungle wasn't making it easy. Every step felt like a battle, as the underbrush tangled at their feet, slowing their pace. The air was thick with humidity, making it hard to breathe. The further they went, the more disorienting it became. The trees seemed to stretch higher, the leaves turning darker and more unfamiliar. Lyra suddenly stopped in her tracks, her ears twitching as if she had heard something. Jake froze beside her, instinctively reaching for his rifle. "What is it?" Jake whispered. "I hear something," Lyra replied, her voice low. Her eyes flickered in every direction, scanning the jungle. Something's coming. Jake's heart raced. Didn't need to ask who it was. The moment Lyra's senses went on alert, he knew they were being followed. He gripped his rifle tighter, his body tense as he prepared for whatever was about to emerge from the shadows. There was a rustling sound in the trees, followed by a low, guttural growl. It wasn't like anything Jake had ever heard before. It was deep and menacing, sending chills down his spine. From behind a thick wall of leaves, something large and dark emerged, massive, with legs that seemed to stretch endlessly. A giant spider, its body gleaming with a sticky, web-like substance. Jake's stomach turned as he realized that this was no ordinary creature. This was one of the spiders that had trapped Lyra, a creature bred for hunting and capturing. The spider's 8 eyes glowed with an eerie light, its sharp mandibles clicking as it advanced, moving with unnatural speed. Lyra tensed beside Jake, her claws already emerging from her fingers. She was ready to fight, but Jake knew that this creature was far too strong. They needed a plan, and fast. "Lyra, stay behind me," Jake shouted as he raised his rifle, but Lyra didn't listen. With a snarl, she leaped forward, her claws slashing through the air as she attacked the spider, and Jake's heart skipped a beat. This was madness. She was far too weak to fight something like this. The spider hissed, swinging its massive legs in a blur, trying to strike Lyra down. But she was fast, dodging the creature's attacks with the agility of a predator. Her werewolf form gave her the edge, allowing her to move in ways that Jake couldn't even follow. Jake fired a shot, aiming for the spider's underbelly. The bullet barely penetrated the creature's thick exoskeleton, but it distracted the spider long enough for Lyra to land a solid blow, slashing at one of its legs with her claws. The spider screeched in pain, its many eyes flashing with rage. "Get back," Jake yelled again, but Lyra wasn't listening. She was already engaged in combat with the beast, her every move full of fury. Jake knew they couldn't keep this up for long. The spider was powerful, and they were both at a disadvantage. He needed to do something before Lyra got hurt. His eyes darted around, looking for any advantage. The dense jungle was full of obstacles, but there was one thing that might work. He spotted a cluster of dried-out branches and rocks nearby, perfect for setting up a trap. "Lyra, fall back," Jake shouted once more. Now, this time, Lyra hesitated, but she trusted him. She darted toward Jake, narrowly avoiding a strike from the spider's sharp mandibles. As she reached him, Jake took a deep breath and pulled out a flare from his pack. "This is going to be dangerous," Jake muttered to himself, as he quickly set the flare in the dry brush. He ignited it, and in a flash, the flare lit up, sending bright red sparks into the air. The spider shrieked, clearly startled by the sudden explosion of light and heat. Its many legs scrambled backward, disoriented. Jake knew this was their chance. "Move now," he shouted, pulling Lyra to safety. They ran as fast as they could, with the spider in hot pursuit. The flare had created just enough confusion to give them the edge, but they couldn't let up. They had to get out of its reach before it regained its bearings as they pushed through the thick underbrush. Jake could hear the spider's heavy footsteps behind them, its legs scratching against the ground. Lyra's breathing was ragged, and Jake could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. They needed to find shelter, a safe place to regroup. "We're not far from the clearing," Lyra gasped, her voice filled with urgency. "It's just ahead. We can lose it there?" Jake nodded, knowing they had no other choice. They reached the clearing, just as the spider closed in on them. Lyra, already weakened from her earlier transformation, barely had enough strength to keep going. Jake took a deep breath and made his decision, grabbed Lyra's arm and pulled her toward a large rock formation in the center of the clearing. "Get to the rocks," he ordered. With the last of their strength, they made it to the shelter. Jake took a quick look around and knew that they would have to make their stand here. The spider was closing in, its many eyes reflecting the light from the flare. "Get ready," Jake said, preparing himself for the worst. Lyra's claws were out again, and despite her exhaustion, she looked ready to fight. Jake took aim, his rifle raised and steady. The fight wasn't over yet. The massive spider loomed before them, its many eyes glowing ominously in the dim light of the clearing. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as he kept his rifle aimed at the creature, his fingers trembling on the trigger. It wasn't just the spider that was dangerous, it was the situation. They were trapped with nowhere to run. Lyra, still recovering from her earlier exhaustion, gritted her teeth and stood beside him, her claws extended, was clearly on edge, her glowing eyes flickering with a mixture of fear and anger. She didn't want to fight, but it was clear that there was no other option. "We can't let it get any closer," Jake said, his voice low but determined. "Stay behind me." Lyra nodded, her breath quick and shallow. She was still struggling to control her transformation, and Jake could see the toll it was taking on her. Her body was trembling, her claws twitching, as though the wolf inside her was ready to burst free at any moment. The spider hissed, its mandibles clicking as it took a step closer, its long legs reaching out to block their escape. The creature was fast, far faster than Jake had expected, and he could see the powerful muscles rippling beneath its exoskeleton. "This is it," Jake whispered to himself. He had to think fast. They couldn't stay here much longer. Lyra was already weakened, and the spider was closing in too quickly for him to take a clean shot. He needed a way to outsmart the creature. Before he could make a decision, Lyra's voice broke through his thoughts. "Jake, ... I can feel it. ... I can feel it." Happening again. Jake turned to see Lyra's body begin to shift, her muscles bulging beneath her skin. Her back arched as her limbs lengthened, and her face contorted in pain. The transformation was starting again, the wolf inside her struggling to take control. "Lyra, no," Jake shouted, reaching out for her. "Stay calm. Need to stay in control." But it was too late. Transformation was unstoppable, and as Lyra let out a low, guttural growl, her form shifted fully into that of a werewolf. Her eyes glowed a bright, intense blue, and her claws became even sharper than before. Her fur bristled in the moonlight, and her teeth were bared in a snarl. Jake took a step back, fear coursing through his veins. He had seen Lyra shift before, but this was different. The power radiating off her was overwhelming, and for a moment, he wasn't sure if she would still recognize him. "Lyra, listen to me," Jake pleaded, his voice trembling with both fear and urgency. "We need to work together. We can't fight it alone." The werewolf girl looked at him, her blue eyes flickering with recognition. For a moment, it seemed as though she was listening, the human part of her still there beneath the beastly exterior. But then, her gaze shifted to the spider, and with a feral growl, she lunged forward. Jake watched in awe as Lyra attacked the spider, her powerful limbs moving with lightning speed. Her claws sliced through the air, striking the creature with incredible force. The spider screeched in pain, its legs thrashing as it tried to defend itself. But Lyra was relentless. She slashed at the spider's thick exoskeleton, her claws digging into its flesh. Jake, despite the danger, couldn't help but be amazed at the sheer strength Lyra possessed. She was no longer just a girl trapped in a web. She was a powerful, unstoppable force of nature. And right now, she was fighting to protect them both. The spider retaliated, its massive legs swinging toward Lyra with terrifying speed. One of its legs struck her side, sending her crashing to the ground. For a moment, Jake's heart stopped. Was she hurt? Was she ... But then, to his relief, Lyra pushed herself up, her werewolf form barely fazed by the blow. She snarled, fury in her eyes, and launched herself back into the fight. Jake knew that if they didn't act quickly, they would both be overwhelmed. He needed to help her. He couldn't just stand by and watch. Reaching into his pack, he pulled out a small grenade. He didn't have many of these left, but this was their best shot. He knew the spider's tough exoskeleton was its weak point, and if he could get the grenade close enough, it might just be enough to take it down. "Lyra, get out of the way," Jake yelled, his voice urgent. The werewolf girl, her senses sharper than ever, glanced over her shoulder and understood immediately. She sprinted toward the spider, her speed unmatched, and distracted the creature by slashing at its legs once again. Jake took the opportunity. He ran forward, throwing the grenade. With precision, it sailed through the air, landing just beneath the spider's abdomen. There was a brief, tense moment of silence, followed by a loud, deafening explosion. The blast was powerful, sending shockwaves through the clearing. The spider let out a final, agonizing screech before collapsing to the ground, its body twitching. Violently, Jake's ears rang from the explosion, but he didn't have time to think. He rushed to Lyra's side, who was panting heavily, her glowing eyes flickering as she slowly reverted to her human form. Her body was still shaking, but the immediate threat had passed. "You did it," Jake exclaimed, his voice filled with awe. Lyra gave him a weak smile, her chest heaving as she struggled to regain control. "We did it," she whispered, "together." Jake knelt beside her, checking for any signs of injury. "Are you hurt?" Lyra shook her head, though her expression was still tense. "No, just tired. It's always like this. The transformation takes everything out of me." Jake frowned. He could see how much it was affecting her, both physically and emotionally. "You don't have to do this alone, you know. I'm here for you." Lyra looked at him, her expression softening. "No, and I'm grateful." The jungle around them had fallen silent once again, but Jake knew this was only a temporary reprieve. The spiders were not the only danger in this alien jungle. They had barely made it out of this encounter alive, and they still had a long way to go. "We need to keep moving," Jake said, his voice firm. "There's no telling how much time we have before more of those creatures show up." Lyra nodded, her strength returning slowly. She got to her feet, her body still unsteady but determined. "Let's go. I can't stay in one place for long." Together, they moved on, deeper into the jungle, both knowing that they had only just begun their fight for survival. The jungle stretched out before them, endless and oppressive. The thick trees loomed high above, their twisted roots snaking across the ground. The air felt thick with the smell of damp earth and rotting vegetation. Jake's senses were on high alert as he moved cautiously through the dense underbrush, his rifle ready in his hands. Beside him, Lyra walked slowly, her pace unsteady but determined. Her transformation had taken a heavy toll on her, and though she tried to hide it, Jake could see the exhaustion in her eyes. Every few steps, she would stumble slightly, catching herself just in time. She was strong, no doubt, but the cost of the shift had drained her. "Are you sure you're okay?" Jake asked quietly, keeping his voice low. Lyra nodded, though her expression was tight. "I'll be fine, just tired." Jake didn't believe her. He had seen the toll that her werewolf transformations took on her body, but he didn't press. The issue? There were bigger concerns at the moment. The spiders they had just fought off were only a part of the problem. They had barely managed to escape, and now they were deeper in the jungle, further from safety than ever. "You're sure we're heading in the right direction?" Jake asked, scanning the jungle around them. Lyra glanced up, her glowing eyes scanning the trees with a sharpness that Jake couldn't match. "Yes, I know this place. There's a clearing ahead. It's not far," good Jake muttered. He wasn't sure how much further they could go before they were caught. The tension in the air was palpable. Every snap of a twig, every rustle in the underbrush sent a shiver down Jake's spine. They weren't alone. He could feel it. Something was following them. Lyra stopped suddenly, holding up a hand to signal Jake to halt. Her eyes narrowed, and she tilted her head as if listening for something in the distance. Jake did the same, straining his ears. At first he heard nothing, but then a faint sound reached him, a low, steady crunching noise like something large. Moving through the jungle, Jake's grip on his rifle tightened. "What is that?" Lyra's face hardened. "It's them. They've found us." Jake's heart sank. "Who?" "The ones who control the spiders. They're the ones who want me." "Back," Lyra said, her voice low and filled with regret. "They won't stop until they have me." Jake turned to look at her, his eyes filled with determination. "Then we'll make sure they don't get you." Before Lyra could respond, the sound of movement grew louder, and suddenly, from the shadows of the trees, figures emerged. They were humanoid in shape, but unlike anything Jake had ever seen. Tall and imposing, with skin like stone and eyes glowing a deep red. Their bodies were covered in armor made of a strange metallic substance that shimmered in the dappled light. They moved with purpose, as though they were hunting Lyra. Jake whispered, his voice tense. "We need to move. Now." But Lyra was already shifting, her eyes flashing with that same intense blue. "I won't run anymore." Before Jake could protest, Lyra stepped forward, her claws extended and her fangs bared. The humanoid figures stopped in their tracks, clearly surprised by her sudden shift. But they quickly regained their composure, and one of them raised a hand, signaling for the others to advance. "Stay back, Lyra," Jake shouted. But she was already in motion, with a speed that took Jake by surprise. Lyra lunged at the nearest figure, her claws slashing through the air. The figure blocked her strike with ease, his armored body absorbing the blow. Lyra was relentless, her werewolf form giving her unmatched strength and speed. She kept attacking, her movements fluid and deadly. Jake knew they couldn't win this fight outright. He had to think quickly. While Lyra kept the humanoid warriors distracted, Jake sprinted toward a nearby tree, searching for something to use as a weapon. His eyes landed on a large, jagged rock. Without hesitation, he grabbed it and turned back toward the fight. One of the warriors turned toward him, raising a weapon that looked like a long, sharp blade. Jake didn't have time to think. He hurled the rock with all his strength, aiming for the warrior's head. The rock struck its target with a loud crack, and the warrior staggered back in surprise. Lyra took advantage of the momentary distraction, her claws flashing as she launched herself at the warrior, knocking him to the ground. But there were more of them, and they were closing in fast. Jake ran to Lyra's side, his heart racing as he grabbed her arm. "We need to go now."
Lyra hesitated.
Her glowing eyes filled with anger. "I can fight. I won't run anymore, Jake. We don't have time for this," Jake urged, pulling her toward a nearby thicket. "We're outnumbered. We need to find cover, figure out a plan." Reluctantly, Lyra allowed herself to be pulled along. The warriors were closing in, but Jake knew they couldn't risk staying and fighting them all. He needed to get them somewhere safe, somewhere they could regroup and plan their next move. They dove into the thicket, the thick foliage blocking their way just as the first of the warriors reached the edge of the clearing. Jake and Lyra crouched, low, their breaths heavy as they listened to the warriors search the area around them. "They'll find us," Lyra whispered, her voice filled with frustration. "They always do." Jake shook his head. "Not if we keep moving. We need to get to the clearing. We'll have a better chance there." Lyra didn't respond, but Jake could feel her resistance. She didn't want to run anymore, but she had to. They both knew they couldn't win this fight yet. Not until they were better prepared. As they moved deeper into the thicket, Jake kept his rifle ready. The warriors were still searching the clearing, but they weren't giving up. The sounds of their movements echoed through the jungle, growing louder with every passing second. But Jake wasn't going to give up either. He had made a promise to protect Lyra, and he would do whatever it took to keep her safe. The jungle was alive with the sounds of pursuit. The distant thudding of armored footsteps echoed through the trees, sending a shiver down Jake's spine. He could feel the pressure building. They were close for comfort. The humanoid warriors had almost found them, and their relentless search showed no sign of slowing down. Jake's breath came in ragged, gasps as he led Lyra through the dense underbrush. Her werewolf form, though powerful, was beginning to slow her down. She wasn't fully recovered from the last battle, and every movement seemed to take more energy than the last. "Lyra, we need to keep moving," Jake urged, his voice low but firm. "We can't stay in one place for too long." Lyra nodded weakly, her eyes flickering with exhaustion. "I know, I'm not sure how much longer I can keep this up." Jake's heart clenched at the sound of her words. He could see the toll it was taking on her. The transformations, the battles, the constant running it was wearing. Her down, he could only imagine how much it hurt to constantly be in a state of flux, caught between two worlds. Never truly belonging to either, but he wasn't going to let her give up. Not now, not ever. He had made a promise to her, and he wasn't about to break it. "We'll make it," Jake said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "We just need to get to that clearing ahead. It's our best shot." Lyra didn't answer, but she gave a small nod, her gaze focused on the path ahead. Jake could see that she was struggling to keep herself together, but she was still fighting. And that, he realized, was what mattered. As they reached the edge of the thicket, Jake's instincts flared. They were close now, very close. The clearing was just beyond the trees, but it wasn't going to be an easy trek. The warriors weren't far behind, and they would be on them in minutes. Jake turned to Lyra, his eyes locking with hers. "You ready for this?" Lyra's lips curved into a grim smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "As ready as I'll ever be." Jake grabbed her hand and led the way, pushing through the thick branches that separated them from the open clearing. As they emerged into the open space, Jake's eyes immediately scanned the area for any sign of safety. The clearing was wide, surrounded by tall grass and a few scattered trees. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Lyra stepped forward, her glowing eyes scanning the horizon. "They're close." "We don't have much time," Jake nodded, setting his rifle down on the ground. "We need to make a plan. Can't keep running forever." Lyra moved to a large rock at the center of the clearing and crouched down, her senses sharp as she surveyed the surroundings. "We'll fight," she said, her voice steady. "I'm not running anymore." Jake frowned, walking over to her. "Lyra, I know you want to fight, but we need to be smart about this. We're outnumbered. We'll have to use the terrain to our advantage." Lyra's eyes flickered with frustration, but she didn't argue. She understood. The transformation had made her powerful, but it had also made her reckless. She had been running for so long, fighting for so long, that she had forgotten what it felt like to stop and think. "We'll fight," Jake repeated, "but we'll do it on our terms." Lyra gave a small nod, though Jake could see the doubt. In her eyes, she wasn't used to playing the waiting game. She was used to charging in head first, to taking on whatever enemy came her way. But Jake had learned long ago that sometimes waiting was the hardest part of the battle. They spent the next few minutes preparing. Jake set up small traps using the rocks and branches from the clearing, hoping that they might slow the warriors down if they came through. Lyra paced around the clearing, her claws flexing as she surveyed the ground, her senses working overtime. Finally, they were ready. They could only hope it would be enough. Jake crouched beside Lyra as the first of the warriors emerged from the edge of the jungle, their red eyes glowing in the fading light. There were 5 of them, tall and imposing, their armor gleaming in the dim light of the clearing. They moved with precision, their eyes scanning the ground for any sign of their prey. Lyra growled low in her throat, her body tense and ready to spring. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the warriors approach, his finger hovering over the trigger of his rifle. "Wait for it," Jake whispered to Lyra. The warriors were getting closer. Jake could hear the sound of their heavy boots, crunching against the ground. Lyra's eyes locked onto the nearest one, her body ready to lunge. But Jake held her back, his hand on her arm. "Not yet," Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper. Then, in a flash, one of the warriors stepped into a trap Jake had set, a large rock camouflaged in the grass. The moment the warrior's foot hit it, the trap sprang to life, sending a flurry of sharp branches and debris flying into the air. The warrior staggered back, caught off guard. Lyra wasted no time. She launched herself at the warrior, her claws slashing through the air. With a roar, she struck, knocking the warrior to the ground. The others reacted immediately, charging toward them with weapons drawn. Jake took aim and fired his bullet, striking the chest of one of the warriors. The creature stumbled back, but it didn't fall. He fired again, this time hitting the warrior in the leg. The warrior dropped to the ground, letting out a sharp cry of pain. Lyra, now fully in her werewolf form, was a blur of motion. She attacked with incredible speed, her claws tearing through armor and flesh alike. The warriors were strong, but they weren't prepared for someone like her. She was unstoppable, but there were still more of them, and Jake knew they couldn't keep this up for long. They needed to end this quickly. "Lyra, move," Jake shouted, rushing toward her. He grabbed her arm and pulled her away from the fray, lending her toward a nearby ridge that overlooked the clearing. The warriors regrouped, their eyes filled with rage. They weren't going to give up, and Neither were Jake and Lyra. Together, they stood their ground, ready to fight for their freedom.